Hey, you ever get that feeling like the universe is trying to tell us something?
Like it's whispering secrets.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And you know those materials you sent over, the ones about death and life? Totem Leben? I gotta say, they're giving me those vibes.
Intriguing, isn't it?
Totally. We're talking scientific articles mixed with ancient spiritual texts, German newspapers mentioning Indian mystics. It's a lot.
It's a unique blend of perspectives, that's for sure. We're dealing with a concept that crosses boundaries, cultures, disciplines. It speaks to something universal.
Right. Like, I saw death in life, and honestly, my first thought was, whoa, kind of dark. But then I actually started reading through the stuff you sent, and it's obviously not about, like, actually dying. It's more about, I don't know, a state of being, a transformation. There's even one article that connects it to the expanding universe.
Oh, you're talking about that piece from the German newspaper.
Yeah, that's the one. It was talking about how astronomers are using the Hubble telescope
To measure how fast the universe is expanding. These are really interesting analogy in the article. Did you catch it?
Was it the raisin bread one?
That's the one.
Okay, so like how the raisins spread out as the dough rises, that's the universe expanding.
Exactly. It's a simplified way to visualize it, but you get the idea.
Right. But then they took this whole expanding universe thing and get this, they connected it to that Zon saying.
An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth.
Yep, that's the one. It's like
Yeah.
they're saying even the universe believes in fairness, you know? Like every action has a consequence.
Fascinating, isn't it? This scientific observation about the universe expanding, and they link it to this moral principle of karmic justice, which, of course, is something often associated with Eastern philosophies. It's as if the article is suggesting this principle of karmic justice might actually be woven into the very fabric of existence.
Okay, so we're not just talking about some abstract idea here. We're talking about a potential force that's shaping the universe. That's some pretty heavy stuff.
It really makes you think, doesn't it?
It does. And speaking of weighty matters, we've also got Anurag Sagar to dive into.
Ocean of Love. A beautiful title, don't you think?
It really is, and it seems to explore this whole Todd and Leben concept in depth.
It does. Kabir's work, Anurag Sagar, really gets to the heart of this idea of death in life. And it explains it not as an actual physical end, but as a kind of liberation, a freedom, if you will, from those cycles of suffering and rebirth.
Hold on, so not actually dying, but transforming instead.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. But how does this transformation happen? Is it something we actively do, or is it something that just kind of happens to us?
Well, that's where the concept of Talien's princip comes in, the law of retaliation.
Okay, Talien's principle, the law of retaliation. I'm following along.
So Anurag Sagar links this law to karmic retribution. It suggests that our actions actually shape our destiny, and that ultimately those actions are what contribute to this transformation.
So let me make sure I'm getting this right. We've got this universe, and it's expanding. Our actions have consequences, and they're tied into this larger principle of karmic justice. And somehow, all of that leads to a personal transformation where we break free from these cycles of suffering and rebirth.
You got it.
Wow, it's like these sources are showing us two sides of the same coin. We've got the vastness of the universe on one side, and then we've got this very individual journey within it on the other.
Beautifully put. And Anurag Sagar actually offers this really powerful image to illustrate this idea, the story of Vishnu transforming into Sheshnag.
Right, Vishnu, the Hindu deity, resting on the giant serpent Sheshnag. But how does that symbolize death and life? Is it just about, like, powerful beings changing forms?
Think of it more as letting go of a previous form to embrace something new. Vishnu, this incredibly powerful entity, choosing to take on a different form, and perhaps in doing so, achieving an even greater purpose. It really resonates with this whole idea of transcending limitations, wouldn't you say, of moving into a state of deeper understanding.
So, shedding an old skin to reveal something. More and more. I'm starting to see how this ties into personal growth, you know, and the potential we all have for change within ourselves.
Exactly.
And speaking of growth, there was something in these sources about an insect and some kind of transformation, right? Tell me more about that.
Yes. That would be the parable of Biranki from Anurag Sagar. It talks about this insect who happens to live near a superior being, and simply by being in such close proximity to this being, the insect eventually takes on the qualities of that being.
Wow, that's wild. It's like that saying, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
It is.
But on a much deeper level, like our environment, the people we surround ourselves with, they can really have a huge impact on who we become.
That's exactly the point Kabir seems to be making, that this proximity to a teacher, a mentor, or even to a higher power, it can actually be the catalyst for our own death in life, our own personal liberation from our limitations.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting, because now we're not just talking about some abstract transformation. We're talking about the very real impact our environment, our relationships can have on our own personal journeys. I'm starting to see how this death in life concept might actually apply to everyday life.
That's the beauty of it, isn't it? It's both this grand cosmic principle, but it's also this intimate personal experience.
It really is. This is already a lot to unpack, though, and we haven't even gotten to the death part of death in life. It still feels kind of ominous, don't you think?
It does have a certain weight to it, doesn't it?
Maybe the next source will shed some light on that, so that death part of death in life does feel a little heavy.
Yeah.
It's like, are we really talking about, like, the end here?
Well, maybe not an end in the traditional sense.
Okay, so what are we talking about?
Think of it more like a shedding, a transformation.
A transformation, okay. Like a caterpillar turning into a butterfly.
That's a good way to think about it.
Okay, I'm following. So it's not really about physical death then.
Right. Kabir actually uses a really interesting analogy in Anurag Sagar to explain this. The process of refining sugarcane.
Sugarcane. Okay, I'm not sure I see the connection here.
So you know how sugarcane is crushed and boiled to become sugar?
Yeah, I get that part. But how does that relate to death in life?
Well, Kabir uses that process as a metaphor for the soul's journey.
Interesting. So it's not about physical death, but about those trials and tribulations we go through in life. Like those experiences are what refine us, what help us shed our limitations.
Exactly. It's the crushing of the sugarcane, those challenges that actually allow its sweetness to emerge.
Okay, I like that.
Kabir's suggesting it's the same for us. That we need those challenging experiences to refine ourselves, to achieve that liberation, that state of death in life.
Wow. So instead of fearing those tough times, those challenges, maybe we should actually see them as opportunities for growth.
Precisely.
That's a pretty powerful and empowering way to look at things.
It is. This whole idea of death in life, it's about embracing a new way of being, one that's not bound by our current limitations.
I like it. So how do we do that? How do we embrace this new way of being?
Well, that's a great question. And it's something that's been explored by spiritual seekers for centuries. But the good news is, our sources actually offer some practical insights into how we might be able to nurture this death in life within ourselves.
Okay, now you've got my attention. Give me the secrets. What are these practices?
Well, one common thread that runs through many traditions and something that comes up repeatedly in the sources you provided is the practice of meditation.
Meditation. Makes sense.
Right.
It's about quieting the mind, finding that stillness within. It's like we're creating a space for this transformation to happen, right?
Exactly. By calming all that mental chatter, we can actually create the space for those deeper insights to emerge.
To connect with that atypic energy we talked about earlier.
Exactly.
So instead of trying to force change, it's more about creating the right conditions for that change to occur naturally.
I think that's a great way to put it.
I like that. It feels a lot more manageable, that's for sure. What else do our sources suggest?
Another powerful practice, and one that actually beautifully complements meditation, is this idea of satsang.
Satsang. Okay, what's that?
It means association with truth, or company of the good.
Association with truth. Company of the good. So it's about who we surround ourselves with.
Exactly. Remember that parable we talked about earlier?
The one with the insect?
Yes. The insect who transformed just by being near a superior being.
Right, Virangi.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Satsang highlights that idea, the power of our environment, the idea that we can actually uplift and inspire each other on this journey.
That we can help each other grow. I love that. It's like choosing to be in a space, in an environment where growth is not only possible, but it's encouraged, it's nurtured. We've all felt that difference, right? Between environments where we thrive and environments where we feel stifled. Like we can't quite catch our breath.
It makes all the difference.
It really does. Okay, so we've got meditation, we've got satsang. What else?
Well, there's one more important piece to this puzzle, this idea of seva.
Seva.
It means selfless service.
Oh, yeah. Selfless service.
Yeah.
So shifting our focus from ourselves to something larger.
You got it.
How does that tie into this whole death and life transformation?
Many traditions that talk about death and life, they emphasize the importance of looking outward, of dedicating ourselves to something beyond our own individual needs.
So detaching from that ego-driven perspective, that constant focus on me, myself, and I, and tapping into something more expansive.
Exactly. By engaging in seva, in selfless action, we start to loosen the grip of the ego, which, let's be honest, often fuels our sense of separation,
Yeah.
our suffering.
Right. It's like they say, it is in giving that we receive.
Exactly.
Wow. We've covered so much ground here. We went from talking about the vastness of the expanding universe to these very personal, very practical practices of meditation, satsang, and seva.
It's quite a journey.
It really is. It drives home the point that this whole death and life thing, it's not just some abstract concept. It's both a cosmic principle and it's something that we can actually cultivate in our own lives.
I think that's a beautiful way to put it.
So we've been talking about this shift, right? From external heat to an internal one. This whole finding peace and fulfillment from within ourselves as part of death and life. But how do we actually cultivate that? Like, it's a great concept and all, but can we really just, like, will ourselves to transform?
Well, it's a question that's captivated spiritual seekers for centuries, really. But the good news is our sources offer some practical insights.
Okay, tell me more. I'm all ears. What are these insights? What can we do?
Well, one thing that comes up again and again is this idea of meditation.
Meditation, yeah. That makes sense, right? It's about quieting the mind, finding that stillness within. It's like creating a space where transformation can happen, right?
Precisely. By calming that constant chatter of our thoughts, it allows us to create that fertile ground, if you will, where deeper insights can emerge.
And where we can connect with that adhyatmic energy, that internal heat.
Exactly.
So it's not about forcing the change, but about setting the stage, creating the right conditions for it to happen naturally.
That's a great way to put it.
So meditation, check. What else?
Another powerful practice, and this one really complements meditation beautifully, is satsang.
Satsang. I've heard that word before, but what does it mean again?
It means association with truth, or company of the good.
Association with truth, company of the good. So basically who we choose to spend our time with, right? The company we keep.
Exactly. Remember that parable we talked about? The insect that transformed by just being near a superior being?
Right.
Yeah.
Jirangi.
Yes. Satsang really emphasizes that, the power of our environment, and the idea that we can actually uplift and inspire each other on this path.
That we can support each other's growth. I love that. It's like consciously choosing to be in a space where growth is not only possible, but it's encouraged, it's nurtured.
Exactly.
We've all felt that, right? The difference between an environment where we thrive and one where where it's just harder to breathe.
It makes all the difference in the world.
It really does. So we've got meditation, satsang, anything else?
One more thing. A big one, actually. This idea of seva.
Seva. Okay. Refresh my memory. What does that mean again?
Seva means selfless service.
Selfless service.
Yeah.
So shifting our focus outward, away from our own needs and desires and towards something larger than ourselves.
You got it.
And how does that tie into death in life, this transformation we keep talking about?
Many spiritual traditions that talk about death in life, they really emphasize this idea of looking outward, of dedicating ourselves to something beyond our own individual needs.
So it's about moving away from that ego-driven perspective,
Right.
the me, myself, and I of it all,
Exactly.
and connecting with something bigger, something more expansive.
By engaging in seva and selfless service, it helps us to loosen the grip of the ego. And the ego, well, it tends to fuel our sense of separation, our suffering, really.
It's like that saying, right? It is in giving that we receive.
There's a lot of wisdom in that saying.
That's for sure. Wow, we've covered so much ground in this deep dive. I mean, we started out talking about the vastness of the expanding universe, and now here we are talking about these incredibly personal practices.
Right.
Meditation, satsang, seva. It really shows how this death and life thing, it's not just some abstract concept, is it?
Not at all.
It's both a cosmic principle and something we can cultivate in our everyday lives.
It's a beautiful thing, really, this interconnectedness between the vastness of existence and our own individual experiences.
It is. And on that note, to our amazing listener, we hope this deep dive has sparked something in you, maybe inspired you to see things a bit differently.
That's what it's all about.
Remember, this isn't about chasing after some mystical experience or trying to achieve some kind of spiritual enlightenment overnight.
It's about recognizing the transformative power that's already within us.
Yeah.
And all around us.
It's about waking up to who we truly are, beyond all those limitations, all those stories we tell ourselves, and embracing the fullness of this moment right here, right now. And on that note, we'll leave you with this. What if death in life isn't about dying at all? What if it's about truly living? Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep into the mysteries of existence.